After perishing in a fire, I opened my eyes to find myself at my wedding alongside my spouse and child. This time, my spouse chose her childhood sweetheart, who had just returned from abroad, to marry him. She was utterly repulsed by me, expelling me from the company and allowing her sweetheart to take over. "I won't marry a failure, besides, he's just a pawn of my Zhang family," she declared. Consequently, after her sweetheart took control of the Yushin company, the business faced a series of failed bids and even became embroiled in a murder scandal. My spouse returned to plead with me, but only to ask me to take the blame for her sweetheart. Seeing my hesitation, she attempted to use the debt of gratitude I owed her family against me. I laughed maniacally, gazing at my wife, who had been reborn alongside me. "I had settled the Zhang family's debt in my previous life, now it's you who owe me. Keep searching, if you can't find Lian today, I'll make you regret it." I opened my eyes to see the furious face of Zhang's father. The stab wounds on my body still throbbed faintly, but when I looked down, I found no injuries. It was as if being stabbed to death by the victim's family at the entrance of Yushin company was merely an illusion. Seeing my bewildered expression, Zhang's father grew even angrier and grabbed the cane beside him, about to strike me. The cane hit the wall behind me, fully bringing me back to reality. I looked around and was certain that I had returned to the wedding scene. Zhang's father was still pointing at me and cursing, and the words of the surrounding guests enveloped me. I knew when an adopted son was unreliable. He doesn't even know to look for his wife when she runs away. Adopted son, look at his cowardly demeanor. To put it bluntly, he's just a living son-in-law. Zhang Lian had vanished. My brows furrowed, and my heart was in turmoil. In my previous life, Zhang Lian and I had successfully completed the wedding. It was on the wedding night that she gave herself to Li Ming. I caught them in the act, but she used the debt of gratitude to threaten me into silence. Now she suddenly disappeared, unless she was reborn like me. But before I was stabbed to death, Zhang Lian had already taken all the liquid assets and eloped with Li Ming. Could it be that they also had an accident? The pain of betrayal followed me like a shadow. I took a few deep breaths before I could barely maintain my composure. The one thing I was sure of was that their elopement cut off my only chance of survival. Before I could sort things out, I heard a familiar voice. I looked up and saw the missing Zhang Lian walking towards me with Li Ming on her arm. Her neck was covered in hickeys, and her red lips were still glistening with moisture. "I won't marry a failure, besides, he's just a pawn of my Zhang family." In front of everyone, Zhang Lian put the wedding ring on Li Ming's finger, announcing that he was her new groom. I sneered inwardly. Her actions confirmed that only Zhang Lian had been reborn. If Li Ming had been reborn, he wouldn't have touched the mess that was Yushin company with a 10-foot pole. Her eyes were full of disdain, and when she walked up to me, her disgust reached its peak. "After today, you will resign voluntarily and hand over all your duties to Li Ming." Li Ming had a mocking smile on his lips as he said to me, "Don't take it too hard, Zhang Lian just trusts me." I didn't care about their mockery, my gaze passing through them to the small figure behind them, my and Zhang Lian's child, Xiaoyu, who had died in a pool of blood with me in the last life. Xiaoyu looked at me with hatred, his eyes showing a maturity beyond his years. He took the initiative to hold Li Ming's hand. "Uncle Li is a PhD who studied abroad, while Chen Yin is just an undergraduate. It's only natural that Mom trusts Uncle Li." As soon as he finished speaking, I was certain that Xiaoyu had also been reborn. His words were like the final blow that broke my spine, making me completely give up on this child that I had held in the palm of my hand in the previous life. I was stabbed to death while trying to protect Xiaoyu, yet he still hated me. On my deathbed, Xiaoyu whispered in my ear, "If my real dad were here, he would have been able to protect me." Thinking of this, I couldn't suppress the sneer in my throat. I spread my hands and replied, "It's only right that you change your marriage partner. After all, a child should be with his biological father. But remember this time, it's me who's breaking off the engagement. I think you're dirty." This sentence was like a thunderclap, causing an uproar in the hall. Zhang Lian's eyes were bloodshot. If not for someone holding her back, she would have skinned me alive. "You're just a stray dog begging for scraps from my Zhang family, and you dare to say I'm dirty? You're not worthy." The way she looked at me was no different from how she would look at a dog that she could order around. After calming down a little, Zhang Lian looked at me coldly. "No matter who he is, Xiaoyu is my child, the child of the Zhang family." I pursed my lips, a lingering bitterness in my mouth. Calculating Xiaoyu's age, I could pinpoint exactly when Zhang Lian had become pregnant with him. This time was our make-up wedding, but Zhang Lian and I had already registered our marriage 5 years ago. That night, Lian and I had invited our respective friends for a gathering. Halfway through the party, I discovered the two of them entangled in the bedroom, and I stood at the door, hearing everything clearly. I couldn't bring myself to enter, nor could I leave, afraid that people would find out that my wife had cheated on me right after our wedding. Only after the sounds inside subsided did I push open the door. I still remember Li Ming's humiliating words as he rested his head on Zhang Lian's shoulder, "Isn't this your husband?" Zhang Lian was wrapped in a blanket, revealing a large amount of her skin, and she didn't even spare me a glance, directly ordering, "My clothes are all torn, go buy me a new set. I can't remember how I bought the clothes and delivered them, only that my body and soul felt separated, obliterating all my emotions. I had already repaid the Zhang family's kindness with one life, and in this life, I will only live for myself. With the backing of the Zhang family's eldest daughter, Li Ming embraced Zhang Lian and chimed in, since we've come to this, you should just initiate the divorce and leave with nothing. The two of them echoed each other, clearly intending to kick me out of Yushin Company without any cost. The anger within me was like a volcano ready to erupt, but my expression remained calm. Leave with nothing? I can certainly leave Yushin Company, but I will take what belongs to me. Haven't you always wanted to control Yushin Company? I can sell you my shares. Hearing that I was willing to sell my shares, Zhang Lian's eyes lit up. They originally wanted me to leave Yushin Company, and getting my shares was an unexpected bonus. After all, as long as she could fully control Yushin Company, she could use her memories from her previous life to develop it further. I can't read minds, but I could tell from her expression. I sneered inwardly, mocking Zhang Lian's miscalculation. In her previous life, she attributed Yushin Company's bankruptcy to my decision-making errors, multiple failed bids, and even the purchase of substandard building materials, which led to the building's collapse, ruining years of hard work. But she never realized that the real tumor was standing right beside her. As soon as Li Ming entered Yushin Company, its stock price would plummet to rock bottom, eventually becoming worthless. My early sale is to secure enough cash. Li Ming seemed very excited, and after whispering with Zhang Lian for a moment, they finally made up their minds. Of course, but you can only get half the normal stock price. Even Zhang's father frowned at this. I walked up to Zhang Lian, pulled her aside, and whispered in her ear, you know very well how many dirty things have happened in Yushin Company over the years. If you don't want to burn bridges, don't haggle with me here. Zhang Lian's eyes were full of suspicion, probably suspecting that I had also been reborn, but no matter how she looked, she couldn't find anything unusual and snorted, agreeing to my conditions. Take the money and get lost. Don't let me see you again. Yushin Company has been stagnant under your control for so many years. When Li Ming takes over, he will definitely make Yushin a leader in the industry. No matter what, Zhang Lian always had unrealistic confidence and trust in Li Ming, but she had no trust at all in me, her childhood sweetheart. She seemed to have forgotten that I had also been admitted to graduate school, but I gave up my studies because Yushin was on the verge of bankruptcy. My chest felt like it was being pressed by a huge stone, and the frustration was almost unbearable. I stared at Zhang Lian, trying to find a trace of the past in her face. It was my tireless effort day and night, socializing until I had multiple stomach bleeds and was hospitalized several times. Only then did I pull Yushin Company back from the brink of bankruptcy, but Zhang Lian could negate all my efforts with a few casual words. I finally understood it wasn't that Zhang Lian couldn't love, it was just that she had never loved me. We signed a contract on the spot, and as I left, Xiao Yu stood there spitting at me. Useless waste. Chen Yin is a useless waste. In my previous life, my years of education had no effect on Xiao Yu, and he only called me Chen Yin. Now it seems that it was genetic, he carried that disgusting blood. I never would have imagined my last visit to Yushin would be with my divorce papers. Zhang Lian and Li Ming were not at the company, they had gone abroad for their honeymoon. After that day, however, they were indeed not in the company, but I could hear their names mentioned by the employees. Where did this new vice president come from? Why did he change our working hours as soon as he arrived? I don't know about anything else, but he definitely doesn't understand the business at all. He's just trying to squeeze the ordinary employees. All I could hear were employees complaining about these bizarre rules. I placed the divorce agreement on Zhang Lian's desk, and as I was leaving, I saw Xiao Wei waiting for me at the door. Xiao Wei was my assistant and also my most trusted confidant in this company. In my previous life, he disappeared mysteriously. It wasn't until the collapse of a building that the company was contracted to build that I discovered his body. At that time, the company was exposed for using substandard construction materials, and after a report by an internet celebrity, it quickly fermented. I was pushed out as a scapegoat, bearing the infamy, unable to investigate the cause of Xiao Wei's death. But now, Brother Chen, look at this. Xiao Wei handed me his phone, showing his chat history with Li Ming. After I left, he was responsible for taking over my work. The chat interface was densely packed with work messages sent by Xiao Wei, but Li Ming hadn't replied to a single one. He doesn't reply to my messages, but he still posts on his moments about his travels. Brother Chen, are you really at ease handing over the company to them? Yushin is your life's work. Faced with Xiao Wei's question, I shrugged and said helplessly, I have no choice, I've sold all my shares, and Yushin has nothing to do with me anymore. Xiao Wei had a mischievous smile on his face and whispered, others may not know you, but I do. You must have already found a new place. I smiled mysteriously and didn't directly answer Xiao Wei's question. Things are accomplished through secrecy. Longshan residential area is the largest residential area that can be contracted in recent years, with a total of 7 phases. Yushin couldn't handle it alone, and I plan to split the profits with Chen Yin, each taking on a portion. When Zhang's father established Yushin, he was already a sworn enemy of Chen Yin, and I used Longshan residential area as my stepping stone to enter Chen Yin. I promised to make Yushin give up the contracting rights for Longshan residential area within 3 months. It was now summer, and when I entered the construction site dormitory, my clothes were soaked with sweat. During these 3 months, I would occasionally visit the area contracted by Yushin because I really couldn't remember when that worker had the accident back then. A worker accidentally fell into the cement and died. In order to avoid compensation, Li Ming forcefully suppressed the incident. When the truth came to light, he directly shifted the blame to me, and I was forced to hold a press conference to apologize. I remember that this worker had a daughter who worked tirelessly to find out the truth about her father's death. She gradually became an internet celebrity and found the truth with the help of the public. My frequent inspections were not only to prevent the worker's death but also to use the power of the worker's daughter to completely crush Zhang Lian and Li Ming. However, I didn't know the exact time of the worker's death. Chen Yin, what are you doing here? Once again, I found nothing. Just as I was about to go back, I heard someone calling my name from above. I looked up and saw Xiaoyu standing on tiptoes on the steel bars. It had only been a week since I last saw him. His clothes were tattered, his face was covered in dirt, and he looked like an orphan. I guessed that Zhang Lian had taken Li Ming abroad and couldn't be bothered to take care of Xiaoyu. Why are you here? Why aren't you in school? Xiaoyu pouted and looked at me disdainfully. I am the future heir of Yushin. Why should I go to school and stay with those poor people? I knew it. I'm not your child. Have you ever smelled yourself? You reek of poverty. He pretended to gag. I was a bit stunned, unable to imagine how Zhang Lian usually educated Xiaoyu to have such a personality. I shook my head and didn't intend to say anything more to him. Chen Yin, don't go. Stay and play with me. Still in a commanding tone, I was about to leave when Xiaoyu roared at me, you are a servant of the Zhang family. How dare you disobey me? He was furious, jumping up and down on the steel bars, completely unaware of the danger. Mom was right, you don't know how to be grateful, you bastard. Before the word bastard faded away, I turned around and saw Xiaoyu slip and fall. Thud! A steel bar pierced his chest, and blood gushed out. Xiaoyu reached out to me, his eyes filled with terror, and he pleaded, Dad, Dad, save me. This was the first time he called me Dad, but it was too late. I didn't stop, I just called for an ambulance and watched as Xiaoyu was taken away. This was the last bit of kindness I would show him. As he was being carried onto the stretcher, Xiaoyu stared at me, murmuring, Why? Why didn't you save me? You used to warn me about dangers, why not this time? For the first time, I saw panic in Xiaoyu's eyes. He begged me to go with him to the hospital. I slowly pulled his hand off of mine and grinned. I'm not your dad, go find your real dad. That night, I felt uneasy. I was woken up by the sound of crying outside the dorm. After getting dressed, I grabbed a flashlight and walked out. Not far away, near the cement truck, I saw a girl crying. She wasn't very old, probably a freshman in college. My heart skipped a beat, and I rushed over. When I saw her face, I stopped breathing for a moment. It was Sung Liu. 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind. Could it be that her father had already had an accident? I handed her a pack of tissues. When Muya saw me, she was shocked, but her expression quickly turned to disgust. You want me to shut up? I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. She stared at me stubbornly, her eyes filled with hatred. I know who you are, but I will make the person who killed my father pay. I looked at her, and for a moment, she overlapped with a woman who delivered the fatal blow to Yushin in my previous life. The current Sumuya was still a bit naive, but with a little training, she could become a pawn in my hands. I'm not here to stop you. Do you want to make the person who killed your father pay? Sumuya hesitated for a moment, then nodded firmly. I laid out the whole plan, called Xiao Wei, and asked him to cooperate with me, working from the inside and outside. In less than a week, the cement murder case at the construction site was trending on the internet. In the video, Sumuya tearfully accused Yushin Company of an action, saying that her father's death was a complete murder. Not long after Su's father's death, his body was found in the unfinished building with both witness and physical evidence. Yushin began its first collapse. The day after the incident fermented, the door to my dorm room was being pounded on. As soon as I opened it, I was slapped by an enraged Zhang Lian. Before I could recover, she pointed at me and yelled, Chen Yin, what are you doing? Do you have to destroy Ming to be satisfied? It's just a death. What construction site doesn't have deaths? Do you have to make trouble? Zhang Lian was furious and slapped me again. The taste of blood filled my mouth, and I lowered my eyes. Isn't Li Ming reaping what he sowed? He insisted on covering this up. Could it really be covered up? How did that worker really die? Don't you know better than I do? My words further enraged Zhang Lian. She knew I was the one pulling the strings, but she only thought I was jealous of Li Ming. She was convinced that if it could be covered up in the previous life, it could be covered up in this life as well. In the previous life, she pushed me out to quell the public outcry. I was forced to kneel at the company entrance for 3 days and 3 nights, suffering the scorn of thousands. Zhang Lian forcefully suppressed her anger and reached out to touch the red handprint on my face, but I dodged her. She gritted her teeth and said softly, "Just consider it repaying the Zhang family's kindness. Help me take the blame for Ming. I guarantee you can come back as CEO after you get out. I've made arrangements, you won't suffer in prison." Without waiting for my agreement, Zhang Lian grabbed me, trying to drag me out of the dorm. I stood my ground, my heart completely frozen. I stared at the anxious Zhang Lian and said in a low voice, "I repaid the Zhang family's kindness in my last life, now it's you who owe me." Zhang Lian seemed to be choked by fate, but in a moment, she lunged at me, her expression ferocious. "You did it on purpose. You did this on purpose. You harmed me in the last life, and now you want to harm me again." Even now, she still firmly believed that I was the one who switched the building materials to inferior ones, that I was the one who harmed her. "Xiao Yu's serious injury, you did that on purpose too, right? If something happens to Ming, I'll make you pay with your life." Zhang Lian, as she always did, had no qualms about pushing all the blame onto me. I took a few steps back, revealing Sun Wu, who had been hiding behind me. She was holding a selfie stick, and the phone on it was recording. "Everyone, look. This is the murderer." Zhang Lian stood there, her face dark due to the phone recording. All she could do was glare at me before turning to leave. "Yushin will withdraw from the Longshan Community Project and will provide sufficient compensation to the victims. This incident is entirely due to the general manager's failure to supervise. We have already appealed, and we will give everyone a satisfactory result." The television in the room played the report. Zhang Lian was serious, and with a few words, she defined the nature of the matter. She couldn't bear to see her beloved suffer even a little, and the general manager became their scapegoat. The abandoned general manager stood beside me. The documents he brought were on the table, a thick stack. "President Chen, you said you would give me $1 million, is that true?" I didn't answer but first flipped through the documents in front of me, which were about Bayan's bid for a certain commercial construction project. It was this bid that led to Li's death. The profit from this commercial construction was over half, but it was still not enough to pay off Li Ming's gambling debts. To gain more profit, he took the risk of using substandard building materials, causing the building to collapse, resulting in numerous deaths and injuries. Xiao Wei discovered that he was using substandard building materials and was forcibly drowned in cement. After the building collapsed, Xiao's body was finally revealed. Xiao Wei's death was still vivid in my mind, and I couldn't help but shiver, turning my gaze to the general manager. "I can give you the money, of course, but you have to do me another favor." My eyes were bright as I instructed the general manager to tell Zhang Lian that I was determined to win this bid and let him set a trap for me, making Li Ming owe more gambling debts. Those gambling debts would drive Li Ming to a dead end, forcing him to follow the same path as in my previous life. After the general manager left, Sun Wu, who was standing by, frowned and asked me, "Are you really going to compete with him for this bid? Although you've been promoted, you don't have that much power, do you?" After Yushin withdrew, I successfully entered Lian and obtained a relatively high position. Facing Sun Wu's question, I chuckled and replied, "Li Ming won't give up this bid. Now that Bayan is going downhill, if she wanted to turn the tide, Zhang Lian certainly wouldn't miss this bid. She was reborn with me, so she naturally knew how profitable it was." In the conference room, when I entered, Li Ming and Zhang Lian had already submitted their bids. Li Ming had a confident smile on his face, while Zhang Lian gave me a cold glance. As soon as I submitted my bid, I received a message from Zhang Lian on my phone. "Let me tell you, Yushin is determined to win this bid. So what if you're reborn? Without Yushin, you're just a loser." Zhang Lian was sure I would compete with her, unaware that the price of my bid was even lower than Bayan's in the previous life. After the bidding ended, I noticed that the smile on Li Ming's face disappeared. When I came out of the restroom, I happened to see him making a phone call at the door. "Just give me a little more time, I have the money to pay you back soon. My wife is the president of Yushin. I can run, but can Yushin run?" The person on the other end of the phone seemed to have relented, and Li Ming hung up the phone with a dark expression. He looked up and saw me standing in front of him, becoming even more annoyed. "Chen Yin, do you think I'll let the matter of my son go just like that? Just you wait, I'll collect what you owe me for Xiao Yu and Longshan with interest." I shrugged, finding Li Ming's threat to me exceptionally hollow. Buzz. I looked at my phone, it was a message from Sun Wu. "Follow those people to the construction market. Do you want to come? So fast." The bidding results would come out in about 3 days, and Li Ming had already started sending people to find suitable substandard building materials. It seemed that the matter I had instructed the former general manager to do was done well. Li Ming was already a heavy gambler, and in the previous life, the company's bankruptcy was inextricably linked to his gambling addiction. Before Bayan had me to barely keep it going, delaying the bankruptcy, now Zhang Lian thought she could handle it, and Li Ming, with even more gambling debts, was becoming increasingly anxious. This wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. I looked at the address Sun Wu had on my phone, a cold smile playing on my lips. The day they would be punished was not far off. Yushin Company won the bid for the commercial construction as expected. After a while, I finally went to the hospital to see Xiao Yu after he pleaded with me many times. The hospital was filled with the smell of disinfectant. Xiao Yu looked pale, but the wounds on his body had healed a lot. Xiao Yu looked at me eagerly, his eyes filled with a dependence I had never seen before. Dad, Dad, you finally came to see me. Even though I heard Xiao Yu calling me Dad, I remained unmoved. As far as I know, during Xiao Yu's hospitalization, Zhang Lian and Li Ming never visited him once. Just like in a previous life, when they eloped, they didn't take Xiao Yu with them, and the only one who chose to protect him was deemed by Xiao Yu as unworthy of being his father. During his time in the hospital, Xiao Yu would occasionally share his life there with me. Sometimes he would also wonder why I didn't love him as much as I did in the previous life. After a while, Xiao Yu came to his own conclusion. Xiao Yu held my hand, tears streaming down his face. Dad, it was Xiao Yu's fault. Before Xiao Yu really knows he was wrong, now please forgive me. Just then, the ward door was kicked open with a bang. Li Ming burst in, furious. Seeing Xiao Yu and me holding hands, his anger turned into a mocking laugh. Chen Yin, Xiao Wei is your man. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? I know you're jealous of me, but Yushin just landed this huge deal. Are you really determined to destroy it? He roared the last sentence. Zhang Lian followed him, her brows furrowed in anger. I knew you're still scheming to use those substandard construction materials. An orphan is an orphan, a bastard with no parents will always go astray. Xiao Wei was tied up by the people behind him and thrown into the ward. There was still wet cement on him, his mouth was sealed with tape. I was about to untie him when I was blocked by the bodyguards. Li Ming wore a smug smile, as if he thought he had me cornered. The police will be here soon. You'd better think about how you're going to explain this. Using substandard construction materials is not a trivial matter, you might end up in jail for a few years. I wasn't as flustered as they expected, instead, I stood there with my arms crossed, looking composed. Zhang Lian, heaven must be blind to give you a second chance. Do you really think that I, a person who was kicked out of Yushin, could pull off such a scheme with just a few trusted subordinates left in Yushin? Li Ming's eyes flashed with panic, but only for a moment. He took out photos from his pocket and scattered them in front of me. There were pictures of the general manager meeting me in a large bank transfer. What if I add the general manager to the equation? Is that enough? I think the worker's death earlier was also arranged by you. Zhang Lian didn't expect me to have private contact with the general manager. Now she completely believed Li Ming's words. She was furious, as if I was the one who ruined Yushin. Chen Yin, I can let go of the worker's accidental death. I can even pretend that you spread rumors about Yushin with Sung Wei because you were angry. But why did you insist on using substandard construction materials again and again? How did our Zhang family ever wrong you? I shook my head and denied it. It wasn't me. You're still lying. At a time like this, while we were in a standoff, the police pushed open the ward door. Officer, it's him. He's the one using substandard construction materials. Zhang Lian, as if seeing her savior, tried to lead the police to arrest me. The police, however, seemed to ignore her and instead handcuffed Li Ming. You are suspected of using substandard construction materials. Come with us. Sung Wei followed the police, she had been authorized and was now broadcasting live. Li Ming has used substandard construction materials, acting recklessly. Now the high UPS want to make an example out of someone, and Li Ming became the scapegoat. As soon as Li Ming was handcuffed, his arrogance vanished. He almost collapsed to the ground, muttering, I can't go in. I can't go in. They won't let me go. He looked around and finally placed his hope on Zhang Lian. He almost begged on his knees. Zhang Lian, save me. Save me. We have a child. If I go in, our child will be fatherless. Zhang Lian was moved. She stood in front of the police urgently, saying, You really have the wrong person. Li Ming is a businessman who just returned from abroad. How could he do something that would ruin his own future? The two officers holding Li Ming looked at each other. One of them, who seemed younger, said, We have collected sufficient evidence, and this Mr. Li has no record of going abroad in recent years. After his words fell, the entire ward fell into silence. Zhang Lian couldn't believe what she heard. She staggered back, staring blankly at Li Ming. Li Ming lowered his head, not daring to meet Zhang Lian's gaze. Sung Wei wore a gleeful smile. Her father's death was inextricably linked to Li Ming. Now, seeing Li Ming brought to justice felt like a huge release of pent-up anger. I helped Xiao Wei up, ripped the tape off his mouth, and patted down his clothes. Xiao Wei took a few deep breaths and finally calmed down. That bastard. He almost buried me in cement too. Luckily, Sung Wei arrived just in time. She was live streaming, and Li Ming was wary of the exposure, so he just tied me up. He took out a USB drive from his pocket containing records of Li Ming's purchases of substandard construction materials. By this time, Bayan's commercial construction had reached a point of no return. Even though Li Ming knew he would be discovered, he still held onto a sliver of hope. He chose the same method as in the previous life, believing that as long as he eliminated all the witnesses, he could get away with it. I glanced at Li Ming, who sat dumbfounded on the floor, a cold smile playing on my lips. Li Ming, do you have anything to say for yourself now? Sung Liu's phone was still live streaming, but Li Ming, having nothing left to lose, became utterly vicious. Chen Yin, what are you so proud of? You raised my child for so many years, painstakingly pulled Yushin back from the brink of bankruptcy, and in the end, it'll still be mine. Little Xiao Yu, lying in the hospital bed, struggled to sit up, wanting to refute Li Ming. No, no. I squatted down before him, looked him straight in the eye, and said word by word, yours? Do you really think you'll ever get out after taking over Yushin? How many people have you buried? How many souls do you have on your hands? Can you even count them? Li Ming was taken away by the police. Zhang Lian stayed in the ward, attempting a final struggle. You knew all along. She looked at my silence, then smiled, tears streaming down her face. You schemed against me. We were married for years, and you schemed against me, Chen Yin. After all your calculations, wasn't it all for Yushin? Wasn't it all to snatch Yushin away from the Zhang family? I knew she was ambitious, that she wouldn't be content as a living son-in-law forever. I was stunned. Even now, Zhang Lian still believed that I did all this for Yushin. After the scandal of using substandard materials broke out, Yushin's bankruptcy would only be faster than in the previous life. I wasn't doing it for Yushin, I just wanted those who wronged me to pay the price. I know you hate me, resent me, but Li Ming could never do such a thing. He wasn't with me for money. After Li Ming was taken away, Zhang Lian seemed to have lost her anchor and started talking nonsense. From her ramblings, I pieced together the complete picture of the previous life. She and Li Ming eloped and were surrounded by a convoy of victims. In the end, they were rammed off a viaduct by the victims, their bodies shattered. Was it her? I knew it. You must have been instigated by someone to do such a thing. Zhang Lian's eyes were bloodshot, and she pointed the finger at Sum Liu, who was standing nearby. Blame Sum Liu. Zhang Lian, who was trying to rush over, pulled out the information about the substandard materials and Li Ming's gambling debts from Sum Liu's bag. This isn't the first time he's gambled. The hole got bigger and bigger, which is why he took the risk of buying substandard materials. I glanced at the stunned Zhang Lian and mocked, you trusted Li Ming so much, and he fooled you twice. Zhang Lian frantically flipped through the evidence, her hand trembling as she picked up a photo of Li Ming at a casino, tears falling from her eyes. Whether it was from hatred or regret, it didn't matter to me anymore. I signaled Sum Liu to stop the live stream. The matter was already trending on social media. Yushin Company suspected of using substandard construction materials. Yushin Company's vice president surnamed Li suspected of murder has been arrested. Sum Liu wept, claiming her father's death had been avenged and her great vengeance had been served. After Li Ming's arrest, due to public pressure, he was directly sentenced to death. To my surprise, during this period, Zhang Lian didn't call me once. I thought, given her relationship with Li Ming, she would at least plead for him once. Yushin Company's bidding was cancelled, and they had to pay a huge penalty, causing their capital chain to break, directly following the same path as the previous life. On the other hand, I was highly valued by Zhang Lian, and my rank rose rapidly. Sung Liu, having avenged her father and served her great vengeance, continued to work in the influencer field, speaking out for the people. Chen Yin established a branch in the province and asked if I was willing to serve as the general manager. I readily agreed. This city held too many memories, good and bad, all intertwined. I wanted to get out of this quagmire. Before leaving, I wanted to see Li Ming. He had lost a lot of weight, and his cheeks were sunken to a frightening degree. When I saw him, he was already half mad. He could only mutter, if only I had come back a little earlier, I could have. He gritted his teeth, his face full of unwillingness but not a trace of remorse. I was a little surprised. Li Ming was also reborn, just a step behind us. However, it was just a surprise. In both lives, he was a complete villain. Being reborn was just heaven's punishment for him. Before I could ask further, Zhang Lian relented and signed a divorce agreement with me. Yushin was now in ruins, and there was no point in dragging things out any longer. My last meeting with her was at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Zhang Lian was dressed in a wedding gown, holding a bouquet of flowers. Is there really no chance for us to reconcile? We've both been reborn, shouldn't we give each other another chance? Tears streamed down her face like a beaded curtain, her beautiful face filled with remorse. Let me marry you again, okay? I shook my head silently. Xiao Yu, who was standing nearby, exchanged a glance with Zhang Lian and hurriedly knelt before me. Dad, we really know we were wrong. He eagerly tried to coax me, but I stopped him. I just found it ridiculous. In order not to divorce me, Sung Liu actually used Xiao Yu as a bargaining chip. What's even more ridiculous is that Xiao Yu was never my child. The moment I received the divorce certificate, the spikes that had been erected all over my body gradually dissipated. Stepping out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the sunlight was blinding. I felt like I was reborn. For the rest of my life, I will no longer live for the Zhang family but for myself.